I have seen a lot in my 43 years on the bench. I have watched people lie to my face, cry crocodile tears, and try every trick in the book to make their problems disappear. But I have never, in all my decades wearing this robe, had a man stand in my courtroom, look at the woman sitting 10 feet away from him, and call her a nobody, only to find out minutes later that this nobody was the reason he was still breathing. That happened on the morning of October 9th, 2023, at exactly 10:15 a.m., when Dr. Julian Mercer, one of the highest paid cardiac surgeons in New England, walked into my Providence courtroom and made the worst mistake of his entire career. You think you have heard wild courtroom stories? Trust me, you are not ready for this one. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what I am about to tell you is going to make you furious and then leave you in tears by the end. Let me take you back to how this whole thing started. The case file in front of me read straightforward enough. Case number 2023-CR-6172, aggravated assault and battery, reckless endangerment, leaving the scene of an injury accident. The defendant was Dr. Julian Andrew Mercer, age 58, chief of cardiothoracic surgery at St. Catherine's Medical Center in Providence, a man who billed north of $3 million a year and had a patient wait list that stretched 8 months deep. The complainant was a woman named Grace Abigail Tran, age 31, a registered nurse on the overnight trauma team at the very same hospital. Now, Grace Tran was not just any nurse. Let me tell you about this woman, because you need to understand who she was before I tell you what was done to her. Grace had been a nurse for 9 years. She started as a certified nursing assistant at 19, changing bedpans and bathing elderly patients in a long-term care facility in Woonsocket for $11.50 an hour. She put herself through nursing school at the Community College of Rhode Island while working full-time nights. It took her 5 years. She never took a semester off. She graduated second in her class. When she got hired at St. Catherine's Trauma Unit, she cried in the parking lot for 10 minutes before she walked in for her first shift. Her mother, a Vietnamese immigrant who worked at a textile factory in Pawtucket for 26 years, had told her, "You are going to save lives, Con. You are going to matter." And she did. For 9 years, Grace worked the overnight shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., the shift nobody wants. The shift where the gunshot wounds come in, where the car accident victims arrive, where the line between living and dying is measured in seconds, and the nurse is the one holding it together until the surgeon shows up. Grace had a daughter named Lily. Lily was 5 years old and had been diagnosed with severe allergic asthma at age 2, the kind that lands a child in the emergency room at 3 in the morning unable to breathe, the kind that requires a nebulizer at home, daily medications, and specialist visits that insurance only partially covered. Grace owed over $34,000 in medical debt. She had $903 in her savings account. She picked up extra shifts at a walk-in urgent care on Saturdays to make ends meet. Her mother watched Lily on the nights Grace worked. Grace made $21.60 an hour. $21.60 an hour to keep people alive in the middle of the night. She never called in sick, not in 9 years. Her nursing supervisor wrote in a review I later read into the record, "Grace Tran is the most dependable, selfless nurse I have ever worked with in 30 years of medicine." When Grace walked into my courtroom that morning, she was wearing a gray cardigan over a white blouse, clean but not new. Her flats were black, scuffed at the toes. Her hair was pulled back. She had the kind of dark circles under her eyes that do not come from one bad night. They come from years of sleeping during the day and working when the rest of the world is dreaming. But she sat down with her back straight, hands folded in her lap, looking directly ahead. Not angry, not dramatic, just steady, dignified. You could see it. If you have ever worked a night shift, if you have ever gone home exhausted, knowing you kept someone alive, but nobody will ever know your name, then please subscribe to this channel. We are a family here fighting for justice and compassion. Join us now. On the night of September 15th, 2023, at approximately 11:42 p.m., Grace was walking through the staff parking garage at St. Catherine's Medical Center on her way into work. Level 3, Section C, near the stairwell. It was dark. Half the overhead lights in that section had been out for weeks. The hospital had been cutting maintenance budgets. Grace was carrying her nursing bag over one shoulder and a small cooler with her lunch in the other hand. She heard an engine, loud, accelerating. A vehicle came around the corner of the parking garage at what security camera footage later confirmed was approximately 38 miles per hour. In a parking garage. The posted limit was 5 miles per hour. The vehicle was a Porsche Cayenne Turbo GT, black on black, valued at over $192,000. The driver was Dr. Julian Mercer. He was late for a surgery consult. He came around that blind corner and struck Grace Tran, hit her directly on her left side. Her body hit the hood, rolled across it, and landed on the concrete floor of the garage. Her nursing bag split open. Her cooler shattered. The impact fractured her left hip, broke 2 ribs, gave her a severe concussion, and tore the rotator cuff in her left shoulder. She was lying on the ground of a parking garage, unable to move, in the dark. And here is the part that made my blood boil. When I read the police report filed by Officer Daniel Reeves, badge number 5143. Dr. Mercer stopped. He got out of his Porsche. He was wearing a Brioni suit, charcoal gray, easily $5,000. His watch was a Rolex Daytona, platinum, worth around $75,000. His shoes were Italian leather, the kind that click on concrete. He walked over to Grace. He looked down at her lying on that garage floor. She said, and this was corroborated by security camera audio, she said, "Please, call for help. I cannot move." And Dr. Julian Mercer, chief of cardiothoracic surgery, the man who took an oath to do no harm, looked at this nurse who had given 9 years of her life to his hospital and said, "You should have been paying attention. I am not going to be late for a consult because some nobody nurse was not watching where she was walking." Let me say that again. This surgeon, this man who made over $3 million a year, called a 9-year trauma nurse a nobody while she was lying on concrete with a fractured hip because he hit her with his Porsche going 38 miles per hour in a parking garage. Then he got back in his car and drove away. He parked on level 4, took the elevator up to the surgical floor, and scrubbed in for his consult. Grace lay on that concrete for 11 minutes before another staff member found her and called a code. Like this video if you believe nobody is above the law. Drop a comment and tell me what you think happens next, because it gets so much worse before it gets better. Grace was treated by her own colleagues in the emergency department that night. The nurses who worked beside her every shift, who knew her daughter's name, who had seen her hold dying patients' hands, they were the ones cutting off her scrubs and setting her broken bones. One of them told me later she had to step out of the trauma bay to cry. Grace required surgery on her hip, 2 pins and a plate. She was out of work for 4 months. 4 months of no income, no extra shifts, no Saturday clinic. 4 months of her mother taking unpaid leave from the textile factory to care for Lily full-time because Grace could not lift her own daughter. The medical bills from Grace's injuries alone exceeded $68,000. $68,000 on top of the $34,000 she already owed for Lily's asthma treatments. This woman, who spent her life keeping other people alive, was being buried by the cost of what a wealthy man did to her and walked away from. The hospital's internal affairs opened an investigation. Security footage was reviewed. Officer Reeves took statements. Dr. Mercer, when confronted by hospital administration 3 days later, told them it was a minor fender bender and that Grace was exaggerating. He lawyered up within the hour. His attorney, a man named Clifton Burke from a firm in Boston that charged $800 an hour, sent a letter to the hospital threatening defamation litigation if they pursued disciplinary action. The hospital backed off. But Officer Reeves did not back off. He filed the criminal complaint. And that is how Julian Mercer ended up standing in my courtroom. He walked in that morning like he was checking into a 5-star hotel. Another Brioni suit, this one navy blue with a faint pinstripe. A Hermes tie, the kind with that unmistakable pattern you can spot from the bench. Those same Italian leather shoes. His attorney Burke was beside him carrying a leather attaché case and wearing an expression that said he had already decided this would be over in 15 minutes. They sat down at the defense table. Mercer crossed his legs. He actually looked at his Rolex, like he was timing us. Grace sat in the gallery with her mother and a legal aid attorney. She was still using a cane. I called the case. The prosecution presented the evidence. Officer Reeves testified. The security footage was played. You could see it clearly. The Porsche coming around that corner, Grace's body hitting the hood, the car stopping, Mercer getting out, standing over her, and then walking away. The courtroom was so quiet during that footage you could hear the air conditioning humming. Grace testified. Her voice was steady, clear. She described the pain, the darkness, the sound of his shoes walking away from her. Her voice cracked once, just once, when she mentioned Lily asking her why she could not pick her up anymore. She composed herself and continued. Before we go any further, tell me what you would do sitting in my chair right now. Drop it in the comments. Then Mercer's attorney stood to present a defense. But Mercer waved him off. Just put his hand on Burke's arm and pushed it down. He stood up himself. He buttoned his jacket, and he addressed me directly. Your Honor, let me be frank. This is a waste of my time and yours. I am one of the top cardiac surgeons on the Eastern Seaboard. I have saved hundreds of lives. I have a surgery scheduled this afternoon that a patient has been waiting 5 months for. This was an unfortunate parking lot incident, and this nurse, this woman, she walked into my path. She is a nobody, Your Honor. She is an overnight nurse. I am sorry she got hurt, but I should not be standing here. How much do we need to pay to end this? He actually reached for his inside jacket pocket. I thought for a moment he was going to pull out a checkbook. His attorney's face went white. Even Burke knew that was too far. The courtroom went dead silent. My bailiffs, Ray and Thomas, both shifted their weight forward. I felt my jaw tighten. My father's voice was in the back of my mind. My father, who came to this country from Italy with nothing, who drove a taxi in Federal Hill and mopped the floors of a grocery store he eventually owned, used to tell me, "Character is how you treat those who cannot help you." I sat absolutely still. I looked at this man who had just called a woman a nobody to my face, in my courtroom, while she sat 10 feet away, leaning on a cane because of what he did to her. And then something happened that changed everything. Something that Dr. Julian Mercer did not see coming. Nobody did. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened. A woman walked in. She was in her 50s, well-dressed, composed. She walked directly to the prosecutor's table and whispered something. The prosecutor stood up and said, "Your Honor, we have an additional witness, Margaret Mercer, the defendant's wife." Julian Mercer's face changed. Not anger, not confusion, fear. Pure, sudden fear. Margaret Mercer took the stand. She was calm. Her voice did not shake. And what she told my courtroom is something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. 3 years earlier, their youngest son, Ethan, then 16, had been brought into the St. Catherine's emergency room at 2:14 a.m. after a severe car accident on Route 95 near Exit 18. His vehicle had hydroplaned in the rain and hit a guardrail at 60 miles per hour. He had a collapsed lung, internal bleeding, and was going into hypovolemic shock. His blood pressure was dropping by the second. Julian was in New York at a medical conference at the Waldorf Astoria. Margaret was home alone. She got the call every parent dreads, the call that begins with, "Mrs. Mercer, your son has been in an accident," and the world stops turning. She drove to the hospital in her bathrobe. When she arrived, Ethan was crashing. The on-call trauma surgeon was 22 minutes away. 22 minutes. For a 16-year-old boy who did not have 22 minutes. The person keeping her son alive, the person who intubated him when his airway collapsed, who performed an emergency needle decompression on his chest to relieve the tension pneumothorax, who manually stabilized his vitals and talked to him by name for 27 minutes straight until the surgeon walked through the door, was an overnight trauma nurse named Grace Tran. Margaret looked at her husband from that witness stand. Her eyes were steady. Her voice was clear. And she said, "You called her a nobody. She saved our son's life, Julian. Ethan is alive because of her. She held our boy together with her bare hands at 2 a.m, and you left her lying on a garage floor and went to do a consult." The courtroom went so silent I could hear people breathing. Julian Mercer sat down. His hands were shaking. The arrogance was gone. Every trace of it, gone. Replaced by something I have seen 1,000 times from this bench. The face of a man who finally understands what he has done and knows it is too late to take it back. If you have stuck with me this long, you are one of the amazing ones. Please subscribe. What comes next is the moment everyone has been waiting for. I took a breath. I set my glasses on the bench, and I delivered my verdict. Dr. Mercer, I am fining you $50,000. Every penny of that fine will be directed to Grace Tran to cover her medical expenses, her rehabilitation costs, and 4 months of lost wages while she recovered from injuries you caused and then walked away from. You will perform 750 hours of community service, and I am going to be specific. You will perform those hours in the emergency room and overnight trauma ward at St. Catherine's Medical Center, not as a surgeon, as a volunteer. You will change linens. You will restock supply carts. You will deliver meals to patients and their families at 3 in the morning. You will do it in scrubs and sneakers, not in a $5,000 suit. You will learn what the people you call nobodies do every single night while you are sleeping. I was not finished. I am forwarding my recommendation to the Rhode Island Board of Medical Regulation for a formal review of your medical license. Your hospital privileges at St. Catherine's are a matter for their board, but I trust they will be watching this proceeding closely. Then I delivered the words I had been waiting to say since I read that police report. Dr. Mercer, you stood in my courtroom and called Grace Tran a nobody. You said she did not matter. But your own wife just told this court that Grace Tran is the reason your son is alive. She held your boy's life in her hands at 2 in the morning while you were in a hotel room in Manhattan. She is not a nobody. She is the reason you still have a family. And you left her on a concrete floor because you did not want to be late. In my courtroom, there are no nobodies. There are no levels. There is only the truth. And the truth just spoke louder than anything your money could buy. The courtroom erupted. Applause, tears, people standing. Grace was crying. Her mother was holding her. Mercer sat with his head in his hands. His attorney Burke was packing his briefcase in silence. There was nothing left to say. 8 months later, the Rhode Island Board of Medical Regulation suspended Julian Mercer's license for 2 years, pending a full disciplinary review. St. Catherine's quietly removed him from his position as chief of cardiothoracic surgery. His malpractice insurance carrier dropped him. Several former patients came forward with additional complaints about his conduct that had been quietly settled over the years. The man who called himself one of the top surgeons on the Eastern Seaboard lost his title, his position, and his reputation. Grace Tran completed her rehabilitation and returned to the overnight trauma shift at St. Catherine's 5 months after the incident. The hospital awarded her a commendation for distinguished service. Her colleagues started a fund that raised over $53,000 for Grace and Lily. Lily's asthma specialist was fully covered for the next 3 years. Grace told a reporter from the Providence Journal, and I keep this quote on my desk. She said, "I just did my job. That is all I ever did." That is the kind of person she is. Ethan Mercer, the son whose life Grace saved, reached out to her personally. He wrote her a handwritten letter thanking her. He is now 19 and studying pre-med at Brown. I like to think Grace had something to do with that. I think about that case more than most. I think about it when I am sitting in my chambers before the morning docket, drinking my coffee, looking at the photograph of my father on the wall. I think about Margaret Mercer walking into that courtroom to tell the truth about her own husband because she knew it was right. I think about Grace Tran sitting there with a cane, steady as a rock, while the man who put her on a garage floor called her a nobody for the second time. I think about how easy it would have been for the system to look the other way. A wealthy surgeon, a powerful hospital, an overnight nurse nobody would have noticed was gone. But the system did not look away. Officer Reeves did not look away. Margaret Mercer did not look away. And Grace Tran, even from a hospital bed with pins in her hip and bills stacking up on her kitchen table, did not look away. My father used to tell me, "Character is how you treat those who cannot help you." I have spent 43 years trying to live up to that. Some days I fall short, But days like the Mercer case remind me why this bench matters, why this robe means something, why every person who walks through those courtroom doors deserves to be seen. To anyone watching who has power or privilege, a title, a degree, a corner office, I am speaking directly to you. Use it to lift people up. Use it to help. The moment you start believing that your position makes you better than the person mopping the floors or changing the IV bags at 2 in the morning, you have already lost the most important thing you have. To anyone who feels invisible, who works the overnight shift, who goes home exhausted and wonders if anyone notices, remember Grace Tran. She was tired, she was struggling, she was in pain, and she showed up anyway, every single night. You matter more than you know. Thank you for watching this story all the way to the end. If you believe in real justice, I am asking you to do 3 things. Subscribe to this channel so we can keep sharing stories that need to be heard. Leave a comment and tell me about a nurse, a teacher, a first responder, anyone in your life who deserves to hear the words, "You are not a nobody." And watch the next video, where a billionaire's son walks into my courtroom and tries to buy his way out of a hit and run that left a retired Marine in a wheelchair. I promise you the ending will restore your faith in everything. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing that justice is not just a word, it is a promise, and I keep my promises.